This is Love Notes, daily devotions from Holy Trinity Lutheran Church. Grace and peace to you. Our text today is Genesis, the 7th chapter, verses 17 through 24. It's a small section of the flood story, an essential text because the flood story gives us so many symbols and understandings of the grace and mercy of God. Like the other stories from Genesis we've had so far, it answers questions that are important to us in our struggle to live as humans. One of those chief questions is, why does God not just eliminate all the evil in the world? Why is it that God allows bad things to happen to good people? Why doesn't God just take care of everything and blot out of existence all the things that make for suffering? The story of the flood answers that question. It answers that question and reveals to us that simply eliminating the evil, well, in the long run, is not how God works, and also won't work. You know the story of the flood. Creation has unfolded and people have become evil and they're doing all sorts of things that God did not intend. Sin has separated the entire creation from God. And so God decides that God's going to start over again. Or maybe this story is more of, what if God decided to start over again? So, God decides that he's going to destroy everything by releasing the divine power that holds back the waters of chaos. Remember, in Genesis, water was a sign of the chaos that covered over all of creation, and that the act of creation was to put things in order, to push back the chaos, to bring land out of the water, light out of the darkness, etc. And so what God proposes to do is to let chaos have its way once again. God's plan is that there is one faithful man in his family who he's going to set aside to be a remnant, to replant, if you will, the created order. And so he calls Noah, and he tells him to build an ark, which his neighbors mock, of course, and to gather animals, whether it's 2 by 2 or 7 by 7, it depends upon what part of Genesis you read. Now, because this isn't a historical document, it doesn't really matter. The point is that God has made a provision in which creation can be restarted, rebooted, rebegun. And so Noah builds the ark, Noah gathers the animals, and the rain starts to fall. The rain falls for 40 days, and it floods everything upon the earth. And that's where we pick up in chapter 7. The flood continued for 40 days. That's not a chronological count. Nobody had a calendar. 40 days, as does the 40 years in the wilderness and the 40 days of Jesus' temptation, simply means long enough for a very long time. The waters fell and the flood persisted. They swelled and they increased greatly on the earth, and the ark floated on the face of the water. All the flesh died, it says in verse 21. Everything that was not in the ark is destroyed. God has dealt with the evil of the world by doing exactly what so many of us think should be done. It's been gotten rid of, erased. It says God blotted out every living thing that was on the face of the ground, human beings and animals and creeping things and birds of the air. They were blotted out from the earth. You see, if you're going to get rid of all of the evil, if you're going to let chaos run, there's going to be collateral damage. There's going to be everything that is touched by it. And we're told only Noah was left and those in the ark. As the story continues to unfold, we know that the flood abates. The waters go down. Noah waits and waits and waits. Now, there's all kinds of humorous questions you can ask, like, how do all those animals, why don't the tigers eat the llamas? What do you do with all of the manure? All of those are really kind of humorous questions that only come to mind when we're treating this like it's a historical account. There's a whole museum dedicated to the historical accuracy of the flood in Tennessee, I think it is. And if you want to go see it, I'm sure it's fascinating. I have no need to do that because that's not why I read this story. Every civilization of the ancient world had a story about a flood. And the Jews, the Israelites, took that flood and then interpreted it through their own experience of God to make sure that God spoke in the way that God spoke. So when the waters have receded, the first symbol that we're giving is that a dove shows up after Noah sends it out to see if the earth is dry, and it comes back with an olive branch in its beak. That's a universal sign of peace to this very day. And it begins as a universal sign of peace from God to humanity. That God is indeed reclaiming out of the chaos the order of creation. The water abates, and so chaos resides. We're reminded of God's power over water in the Exodus story as the Red Sea is blown back and the people escape on dry ground. We're reminded of our own baptisms as we enter into the life of Christ and chaos is overcome by the resurrection. After the waters have subsided and the people come out of the ark, they look up into the heavens and they see that a bow has been placed there, a rainbow. And probably originated from a question about, why are there rainbows, Daddy? And the answer to the question is God put that there to remind us that a new covenant has been made through Abraham, through Noah. And that covenant with Noah is that I will never again, God says, destroy the face of the earth. I will not pluck up the evil and destroy the good alongside of it. I will not do what this flood story says I did. Never again. In ancient cultures, when the king decided it was time to go to war, the king took the bow, the royal bow off the wall and went into battle. And when it was time for peace, the bow was placed back up on the wall so that everybody knew it was a time for peace. That's what God does in this story. God's bow is placed upon the wall forever, and there will be no more destruction. God will allow the good and the evil to grow together, and God will be in the midst of it. God will save a remnant. The funny thing about this whole story is that it doesn't really work. Noah, upon celebrating after coming out of the ark, immediately finds himself caught in sin with his daughters-in-law and other situations, and humanity ends up being as broken as it was before. The covenant of this particular story of Noah sets the groundwork for God's predisposition to be a God of grace and mercy. It's the reason that God does not destroy everything and stop the suffering of the world, because it's just not simple as that, is it? Remember the promise. God will not destroy us because of the evil in the world. And that, my friends, is very good news, because that evil resides, even just for a little bit, in every human heart. Amen.